I like muscle cars and I also like EVs, but there really hasn't been a really good combination of both until now. This is the 2025 Dodge Charger Daytona. But before we get into this review, do us a favor, hit those like and subscribe buttons below to get all of our latest content. Now, as much as I like the Ford Mustang Mach-E, it's really not a muscle car. It's a little too big because it's almost a subcompact SUV. Now, in the trio of muscle cars being Mustang, Camaro, and Challenger, they smartly kept the Challenger appeal and its larger size, which made it easier to fit batteries in. Now, style-wise, this reminds me a lot of the 1968 to 1970 Chargers, which just had this iconic presence and this sinister badness about them. I mean, it was the bad guy car in Bullitt. It ended up being painted orange for the Dukes of Hazzard. It's just a cool, beefy car that I've always loved. A lot of that style comes from the front right here with this opened up grille. It goes edge to edge. It's a lot like those 1970 Chargers, well, without the round lights, I suppose. But man, it's just mean. And I also like this split spoiler here up front that gives it that kind of blunted nose that you want from a Challenger / Charger, but also gives it a little more aerodynamic efficiency and maybe a little bit of downforce. From the side view, I get a strong Challenger presence from the last generation. It's big, it's beefy, it's got these large expanses of sheet metal that still suggest some muscles underneath. It's not overly adorned with vents and other flip-ups and stuff. It's just kind of simple and mean. Back here on this roof pillar here is just one of those signature traits from the Challenger and Charger, and I really like how they handled it here. And back here we have the squared off fender flare that is one of those retro nods, but also adds to its athleticism. The 1970 Charger also shows up in the taillights back here, where it's a single light bar that's really distinctive, especially at night. Also helping to give the back end some presence is this optional spoiler. Now, altogether, I think the styling and design of the Charger has about as much subtlety as a baseball bat, and I love it for that. The entry-level Charger RT starts you off with 2 motors for all-wheel drive as standard. Combined, they produce 456 horsepower and 404 pound-feet of torque, which should get you from 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds. It's the most efficient in the lineup with an EPA estimated 308 miles of range from the 94 kilowatt-hour battery in the floor. The Scat pack adds some serious oomph, increasing output to a maximum of 670 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque when you use the Power Shot button. It gives you 15 seconds of added boost, which amounts to about 80 horsepower. That'll get you to 60 miles an hour in only 3.2 seconds and should cross the quarter mile in about 11.5 seconds at 120 miles an hour. Range is estimated at only 241 miles, and that drops to 216 miles with the optional summer tires. When you do need to charge, it's capable of DC fast charging up to 183 kilowatt hours, which should get you from 20% to 80% in about 27 minutes. Now, as you can see, there's no big honking V8 here. Instead, there's this nice finished frunk that comes with the optional Plus group. And when you step up from the RT to the Scat pack, you get 20-inch wheels, sport suspension, Brembo brakes, additional drive modes, a larger 16-inch digital instrument panel, and a head-up display. And when you opt for the optional track package, that adds adaptive dampers, larger brakes, wider tires, a rear spoiler, synthetic leather and suede seats, and an onboard camera. Now when you sit down and start it up, there's a lot of theater. And I've heard some controversy over the fake noises, but I gotta say, there's something about it that just kind of speaks to my caveman brain, and I like it. Now, the startup is a little loud, so you have the option of turning it off. Now, dropping it into drive, we're still in just the automatic mode, but we switch to sport mode, and that idle gets a little louder. Switch to track mode, gets really loud. So yeah, it's really nice. I do like it. It gives you a little indication of how hard you're driving. And there's also this Power Shot button here. So we'll go to sport mode and hit the Power Shot and launch. Ooh, yeah. That's good stuff. It really gets hopping quick, and you feel that weight shift from the front to the rear and just kind of gets that giddy up with the nose. I really like it. And on top of that, you get just a little bit of wheel spin that makes you feel like you really are pushing just a little bit past where it's comfortable, but it's super, super controllable. So it's not like the other Challenger or Mustang where you might lose control coming out of your Cars and Coffee. This one just tracks nice and straight thanks to all-wheel drive. As you're driving around, you also have selectable amounts of brake regeneration here with these tiny paddles. And when you get down to the highest level, which means you can almost come to a complete stop, but not quite. You do get one pedal driving if you turn off the creep mode, but this is one of the few EVs where I prefer not to have one pedal driving. And that's because there's some weird idiosyncrasies when you're in that mode. When you come to a stop, you feel kind of an abrupt clunk in the last few inches. And when you go to accelerate initially, you also hear another clunk. So it's not nearly as smooth as, say, other more established EVs. But like I say, it's always a good thing to at least give us the option. But when it comes to handling though, it's surprisingly good. Now I say surprisingly because the Challenger, which is what I'm comparing this to as the two-door coupe, was kind of soft and a little wallowy, even when you get to the higher Hellcat range. This, with all of the weight in the floor with the batteries, gives it a much more athletic stance and just feels a little more agile. And yeah, with all that power, yeah, you can definitely have some fun with this Charger. Yeah, just a little bit of tire spin, it speaks to my brainstem. I know it's a guilty pleasure, but you know, in the absence of any other fully electric muscle car, this is kind of it. Now, as I'm driving around and I do get tired of the electric noise, especially if you're just cruising on the highway, it's pretty easy to turn it off. And yeah, then it's just nice and silent, and it's what you expect from an EV. On the outside, those noises are actually quite loud and might draw a little unwanted attention, so dropping into stealth mode, it's kind of a nice bonus. Tossing it around on this curvy road, as much traction as I have and as good as it feels, there's no hiding that this thing weighs a lot. It tips the scales at almost 6,000 pounds. And yeah, that's a lot when you're kind of pushing it on the limit, but when you're just having a good time and driving with a little more spirit, it's really gratifying. It's really rewarding. Now, at the moment, you might see that I'm being bounced around and jostled just a little bit more than you might expect, but that's because I'm in sport mode. This has adaptive dampers, so when you take it out, it smooths it just a little more, and it kind of dulls down the throttle response as well, so it's just easier to drive and a little less jumpy in traffic. Unfortunately, when you are in traffic, it has one of the more primitive adaptive cruise controls that I've experienced in a while. The inputs for brake and throttle are kind of jumpy, and the brakes sometimes will wait a little too long, uncomfortably long, before they start slowing you down. So I was always kind of hovering my foot over that brake pedal while I was driving. I never quite trusted it completely. But hopefully that's something that can be changed with just a little software update in the future. So if you haven't figured it out by now, I really like driving this Charger. I do, I just do, I'm sorry. I feel like I should be apologizing because I know it's not the smartest EV out there, especially when it comes to range and price, but it just makes me happy to drive. It feels a little more special, feels a little, I don't know, meaner. It's almost like when I ride a Harley. It does something to my brain. It makes me feel a little more confident than I should be and maybe a little tougher than I could ever be. But I don't know, I like it. Judge me, go ahead. So let's pull over, talk about the interior next. Now, as retro themed as the exterior is, the interior goes full modern with just a hint of nostalgia. I like how in this top model we have a larger digital instrument panel that's split off from the infotainment touchscreen. It gives the dashboard a little more of a bespoke look rather than just having them behind one giant panel that seemed more tacked on. Now we have the deep gouges in the door panel that continues into the dashboard, and you can see a little hint of that purple ambient lighting during the day, but during the night it gets really striking and really cool, and you can just kind of choose whatever color you want as well. Now this also has the optional carbon and suede package where you get these big expanses of carbon fiber and this nice soft touch suede in the dash. In addition to that carbon and suede group, this also has the optional plus group, which adds that finished trunk, upgraded headlights, a power rear hatch, leather interior, although we have the optional red seats here, heated and ventilated front seats, heated rear seats, that ambient interior lighting, a wireless phone charger, and surround view camera. In this top trim, you also get a premium Alpine audio system, but I was a little disappointed because I had to turn the bass all the way up, which is pretty rare for me, just to feel anything. So I think that could definitely be a little punchier. Now on the inside, I also hear a few more creaks than I normally would from, let's say, a car that cost almost $80,000. But all in all, it's not that bad. There is a lot of hard plastic here and there mixed in with the carbon fiber, but overall, I think it's about what you'd expect from a Dodge Charger / Challenger. Another issue you might run into are these really, really long doors that can be a problem in tight parking spots. But they're long so you can access the rear seats. Now, this infotainment system is fairly easy to use and intuitive, but there are some little delays here and there that make you wait a few seconds. But overall, it's not so bad. Now, you do kind of have to dig around for some of the more secondary and tertiary features, but once you get the hang of it, it gets pretty easy. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard and wireless. When it comes to personal storage, well, it's okay, but not all that impressive. You have this wireless charging pad that's right next to a nice rubberized tray, some moderately sized cup holders, and a moderately sized armrest bin as well. The door pockets are on the small side, and they do have kind of a offset slanted bottle holder, but as you can see, it's one of the smaller bottles. Down here we have a nod to previous Chargers and Challengers with this angled pistol grip shifter. And okay, I like it. It feels good in the hand, and I do like these subtle nods here and there. Now, overall, I really like the interior, but I'm not a fan of this huge panoramic sunroof. It doesn't have a shade or one of those autochromatic things. It just kind of beats down on you without any mercy during a hot day like today. Now, one advantage that the old Challenger had over its Mustang and Camaro rivals was rear seat space, and that carries over to this Charger Daytona. As you can see, I've got plenty of room back here, which is pretty surprising considering that, it's a two-door sporty coupe. I have plenty of headroom with this giant sunroof, and we'll probably have plenty without it as well. And plenty of legroom and knee room and good support for my thighs on this seat cushion that's a little bit elevated. So all in all, yeah, it's really nice back here. I have padded armrests, and here in the middle, another armrest with two small cup holders. And down here in the middle, we have heated outboard seats in this model and two USB-C charge ports with two air vents right below them. Not only does this Charger gain convenience points for its usable rear seat, but also for its fairly large trunk. It can hold up to 22.7 cubic feet, which is giant among muscle cars. Now, there is one thing to note though. With this tapering tail, well, you can only get smaller items near the rear bumper, but thankfully the hatch is power operated with this little button right here, which means you don't have to reach so far up, and it's height adjustable. Now, the rear seat backs do fold, but they're a real pain to get to. You kind of have to reach through there in that little corner or crawl all the way back and pull that latch and pull them down. Prices for the Charger Daytona start right around $62,000 for the base RT. And if you go for the Scat Pack, that kicks it up to almost $76,000. Now, if that's not quite confusing enough, there is something called the 6-Pack on the way, which has a twin-turbo 6-cylinder that's good for between 420 and 550 horsepower. There's also a 4-door coming in 2026, so we'll have a full lineup, although they're all going to be under the Charger name. Now, when you start adding up all these options, which include the After Dark paint, which I love, it's like metallic midnight blue, the Plus Group, the Track Package, the Sun and Sound Package, the Carbon and Suede Package, and those racy red seats, as tested, this comes to $86,460. Ouch. That said, I did a little poking around online, and there are huge incentives, and I saw that you can get this for just under $70,000. So you might be able to save between $15,000 and $17,000 in the real world. Now, as I said, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. It speaks to my brainstem. It just makes me kind of turn to a caveman, and I'm okay with that sometimes. And there's really just nothing out there with this kind of attitude. On one hand, you have the BMW i4, which kind of has an ugly front end and it's a little sterile by comparison. There's also the Polestar 2, which is racy and fun in its own right, but the build quality isn't quite there, and it's a really plastic interior. Now outside of those, you can graduate into larger and way more expensive alternatives that include the Lucid Air, the Audi e-tron GT, and the Porsche Taycan. And they're all really fun to drive, especially on a racetrack, but you could spend well over double what you would for this model without any of those incentives. Now, like I said, I do like this. I kind of want one in my life, but it's splitting my brain. On one end, it wins for all the things it makes me feel, but it loses when it comes to things like price and range. But what would you do? Would you go with the Charger Daytona? Or maybe go for the Mustang Mach-E, or BMW i4 Polestar 2, or one of the larger luxury choices? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and we'll see you in the next review.